everyone, it's Meg. Welcome to our third case of cases being covered here in Southern California where I'm at. Strap in because today's case is a roller coaster, and just when you think it couldn't get any more intense and interesting, it does. As it is November 6th and approaching Christmas time, I thought we could kick it off with the Santa Claus killer case. Our story starts in Covina, which is a city just 22 miles off of Los Angeles, on December 24th of 2008 in the dining room on Knollcrest Drive in Covina, California. Joseph Ortega and his wife of 54 years, Alice Ortega, and their 5 adult children were playing an intense game of Texas Hold'em late at night. Their party was in full swing with 25 guests, and some of the grandchildren were playing video games, while another grandchild was upstairs on the second story on his computer doing homework. At 11:45 p.m. came a knock at the door, and a squealing 8-year-old child named Katrina came and opened up the door, where she was greeted by a man dressed as Santa Claus holding a package like a gift. Just seconds after Katrina had opened the door, the man shot her in the face, and the rest of the family dove underneath the dining room table. With Joseph and Alice Ortega and their 3 daughters underneath the table, this was useless, as Santa Claus began shooting aimlessly throughout the entire house with his other semi-automatic gun. He then unwrapped the gift-wrapped package, which he revealed to be his own homemade flamethrower and a compressor. Little did he know there was actually an open flame throughout the house somewhere, and it caused an explosion where he also got burned from. One of the detectives on the police department said, once you mix those two together, it turns into a vapor, which he atomized the house with. There's no indication that Pardo ignited it. It could have been ignited by a pilot light or a candle inside the house. The Ortegas, 4 of the children, and 2 of their daughter-in-laws would die to the hands of the Santa Claus killer. 3 others were left wounded: an 8-year-old Katrina, a teenager who was shot in the back, and a 20-year-old who jumped from the second story in hopes of escaping. 911 was called immediately, and I'll enter the 911 call right here.
Covina 911.
Yes, I'm on Northwest Avenue. I'm a homicidal guy, and he shot my little cousin right now.
Okay, can you tell if there's anybody injured? Because we have fire department and officers en route.
Hello?
Hi.
Please come immediately.
Who's in your house?
Immediately.
Ma'am, is the guy in your house right now?
We're having 2 houses down on the cookie site.
Okay. Ma'am, hold on. Is he at your house?
Yes, he's got.
The fire department and the police department were on their way, and calls still kept flooding in. And when the firefighters did come, they reported the fire as being 40 to 50 feet in the air, and it took 80 of them to take this fire out. When the police arrived, they described it as chaos, and one lieutenant even said, "When I arrived to describe it, it would be apocalyptic," would be accurate. The only Ortega family that they were able to locate was Leticia, who was on the way to their hospital with their 8-year-old daughter, who was shot in the face. The police department, as well as the entire city, was shocked that a man dressed as Santa Claus would shoot an entire family on Christmas Eve. In the middle of the investigation, the police department received a tip from a neighbor saying that they saw a car leaving the house at 11:45 p.m. The police department did put an APB in the car, and as they were sifting through the Ortega's house, they came across 9 scorched bodies beyond recognition. While the investigation of the Ortegas was happening in Covina, California, on another side of California, Sylmar, California, another situation was being investigated. Brad Parda, who had just come back from a Christmas party, found his brother Bruce Parda lying in a pool of blood in his own house. When the police department arrived, they found Bruce had died from a single shot from a 9mm handgun. The pistol was found in Bruce's lap and another one on the floor. There was another bullet hole through the ceiling, so they assumed that there was a second shooter at the scene. Going back to the Ortegas, autopsies were done on the 9 bodies, where they found that all of them had been shot at least once with a 9mm handgun. The bodies were burnt beyond recognition, and they were only identifiable through dental records. Another piece of information that I forgot to add were that the autopsies showed that the family members were most likely killed execution style, meaning that they were in close range and conscious when the killer had shot them. While they were doing the autopsies, they were interviewing Leticia, who was the only surviving Ortega member, and she said that despite wearing a costume and beard, she knew that the man behind the Santa Claus suit was her sister's ex-husband, Bruce Pardo. This is when they connected the two cases and they dug more into Bruce. Upon just doing a bit of investigating, they found that Bruce was actually Sylvia Ortega's ex-husband, and they had just divorced on December 18th, a few days before the shooting. So after learning this new piece of information, they went back to Brad's house where they found Bruce's dead body, and they searched his car, which was the same car that they put an APB out that the neighbors recognized leaving the house. Inside the car was a Santa suit that had thousands of rounds of ammunition rigged inside the suit. The car was also booby-trapped to explode once the Santa suit was removed. Police department had to call the bomb squad unit in order to use a robotic device to deactivate the bomb without anyone getting hurt. After conducting Bruce's autopsy, they found that he had actually committed suicide and there was no second shooter. They also found horrific third-degree burns on his arms and his hands, and part of the Santa pants were actually fused with his skin because of how badly it burned. And they assumed that he did not initially mean to commit suicide due to there being no note left behind. And finally, wrapped around his leg was $17,000 in cash and traces of cocaine in his system. Like I said, this story just keeps on coming. The Pasadena Police Department received a call from Scott Nord saying that there was a mysterious car parked in front of his Pasadena home. After the PD ran plates on the Toyota RAV4, they found that the car had been rented by Bruce, and that although the car wasn't rigged, there was a computer, supplies, clothing, water, food, and maps of the US and Mexico. Police department thought that maybe he had attempted to flee Mexico or planned to flee Mexico after his little killing spree, but records also show that he had bought an Air Canada flight ticket. So Scott wasn't just some random person who he decided to park his car in front of their house. Scott was actually Sylvia's divorce attorney lawyer. So instead of going to Scott's house to kill him, he actually decided to go home to his brother's house to commit suicide due to how badly his burns were after the explosion. Bruce's neighbor said, "I wonder if the suit hadn't lit and how the story would have ended. It may have had a much different ending." And I completely agree. I believe that if he did, everything went according to his plan, he went on his shooting spree, he probably would have gone to his rented car in front of Scott's house, killed Scott, and actually later evidence showed that he was planning on killing his own mother because his mother took Sylvia's side in the divorce. This guy just has some problems, and if anyone defies him, I guess he just wants to kill them. So police decided to search Bruce's house, and when they got to his house, they reported that his Santa's grotto was actually a virtual bomb factory, and inside his home were multiple handguns, shotguns, and high-octane fuel tank, items that could have caused an even more unimaginable Christmas carnage and chaos. There were also, like we said, traces of cocaine in his system, so they also found traces of cocaine in his house, which may have been used to kind of fuel his killing spree. He might have not been able to do without cocaine. So this is the part when I thought it could not possibly get worse, but it does. So Bruce and Sylvia actually got married in January of 2006. Bruce at the time was a volunteer at Holy Redeemer Catholic Church, and everyone knew him to be kind, outgoing, center of attention kind of guy. But after they got married, Sylvia began seeing who Bruce really was. They began having marital issues due to money problems because Bruce used to have a 6-figure paying job as an electrical engineer. So Sylvia and Bruce bought a large home in Montrose. Bruce owned a Cadillac, Escalade, a Hummer, and a boat he kept on Lake Havasu. So they're obviously very well off, very wealthy. And when Bruce married Sylvia, she was actually a single mom. And so when they got married, she just assumed he would kind of take on that father role. However, he didn't, and he refused to open a joint bank account with her because he didn't want to pay for her children that she had in a different marriage. Sylvia was working at a flower shop, like a flower nursery, and so she only made a fraction of what Bruce made. So taking care of, her kids by herself was a huge deal, and she had to work really hard just to have her kids to eat or to go to school. So Bruce insisted that she took care of them on her own, and at the end of the first year of their marriage, he was cold, distant, and basically in misery with no money, and they were having a ton of arguments. So Sylvia started getting suspicious of Bruce, and she started to do some digging, and she found that in 1989 he actually got engaged to his coworker, and they had planned their wedding, and they planned a very expensive honeymoon to Tahiti. Bruce wasn't making what he was making with Sylvia, the six-figure paying job, so he let his fiance pay for everything. And I'm sorry, why would you marry someone who is like So he let his fiance at the time dip into her own savings account to pay for this very expensive wedding and very expensive honeymoon. On their wedding day, Bruce did not show up, and he was actually withdrawing money from their joint bank account and used their honeymoon and their wedding money to fuel a trip by himself to Palm Springs. How messed up is this guy? There's more. In 2007, Sylvia learned something even more disturbing. Bruce had a child that he had never told her about. When they got married, she obviously had a kid, but he said he's never had a kid, never been married before, and so that's just how she learned it. So 5 years earlier, in 2002, Bruce was watching his 13-month-old child while his child's mother was going grocery shopping for the family. While Bruce was watching TV, the 13-month-old fell into the pool, and when Elena, his girlfriend at the time, came home, she found Bruce holding the baby but doing nothing. He just was standing there doing nothing while the child was obviously unconscious and obviously needed medical attention. So it was this whole thing. There was a helicopter that came to pick him up. He had to fly from a different hospital because they needed to stabilize him because he was in a very, very rough state. Weeks later, the doctors told Bruce and Elena that their child had suffered severe brain damage due to lack of oxygen, and he would be left paraplegic and would need care for the rest of his life. After Bruce learned this piece of information, he took off and he broke his relationship off with Elena because he didn't want to be the father to a child who was paraplegic. There was $350,000 in medical bills, and Bruce refused to pay a single penny of this. So Elena was forced to sue his homeowner's insurance because she couldn't pay for the $350,000 by herself. So the settlement money that she did receive after winning was only a third of what the bills were. So she used all this money to put a down on some of her child's medical bills and to establish a trust fund to help pay ongoing medical bills. But after this, Bruce cut off all contact from them and he never saw them again. However, he does still legally declare this child on his taxes so he could receive money for having a dependent. When Sylvia learned this, she was obviously appalled, and that's when they began sleeping in separate beds, and in March of 2008, they separated. Bruce freaked the heck out, and he basically fought her on everything, and even like the smallest, pettiest little things. So when Sylvia and Bruce officially split up, obviously she was a single mother working a very minimum paying job, so she needed a place to stay, and she asked Bruce if her and her daughter could stay with him, and he refused and actually threw out all of their belongings on the street while they were at a birthday party. And in June 2008, Bruce was ordered to pay $1,700 a month in alimony. The first alimony check bounced, and the second one he just refused to pay in total. He also owed $31,000 of credit card debt and $2,700 a month for the mortgage payment for their house.
Family, Bruce Pardo saw his life going up in flames as well. With a failed marriage, the loss of his job, and financial burdens that were so severe, he asked a judge to have his ex-wife pay him support and cover the attorney's fees he picked up during his divorce. Police say Pardo originally planned to flee to Canada following the Christmas Eve attack. However, the Santa suit he was wearing that night melted on his body.
In July of 2008, Bruce's employer had actually found out that he was fraudulently billing his clients for hours on end, and he didn't actually work, so he was fired. Besides owing so much money in credit card debt, owing alimony, and paying the mortgage for the house, he decided to buy his first 9mm handgun. On August 8th, he bought his second 9mm Big Sawyer handgun, and he waited a month due to the California law of buying, I guess, one firearm a month, where he bought his third 9mm handgun, and he also ordered a custom-made Santa outfit from a tailor shop.
A designer.
You know, when I first heard it, I knew he was wearing a Santa suit, and I knew who he was because I had seen him, but more than one time. So, but I didn't think anything of it until they were saying that he used the Santa suit and he put stuff in the Santa suit, like guns and whatever he used. And then it kind of freaked me out, thinking that maybe he had already planned this for a long time.
Jerry Diot says Pardo appeared to be a decent man. He had bought and rented from her costume store before. He had even shared a family picture with her.
The next month, in October, he bought his fourth 9mm handgun. He also visited his friend in Ziowa, where he purchased 16 magazines that held 18 rounds each. Owning this many rounds were illegal in California, that's why he bought it, not in California. His friend said that he seemed in good spirits, though he had confessed that Sylvia was taking him to the cleaners in the divorce. On November 13th, he purchased his fifth handgun, and that's when he also picked up his Santa suit. On December 18th, the divorce was finalized, and he was able to keep his house, but had to pay Sylvia $10,000. Sylvia was able to keep her very expensive engagement ring and also the family dog. Obviously, after December 18th, on the 24th, that's when he went on his killing spree, and where Sylvia and a lot of her family members would die. Leticia and her daughter actually went on to live amazing lives, and in 2016, Leticia told Oprah, "I can't do anything to change what happened. I could only focus on the future. This is what he's done. Enough. I'm not going to allow you to continue to consume us with your evilness. You don't want the anger to live within you day to day and grow, just like it did with that monster." Some men's rights activists hailed Bruce as someone who provoked and overwhelmed the injustice of the divorce court, and that his rampage was somehow justified because the courts had taken everything from him, including his family. Although he didn't want to be with his family, his stepkids that he received from the marriage, and he also lost no property and only paid a fraction of the home compared to what he put his wife and child through. Another reporter said that the divorce shattered Bruce and it became his obsession, and Bruce began to plot ways to get back at Sylvia, and I think that he decided that he wasn't just going to kill her, but he was going to kill everything that she loved, and to take it and wipe it off the face of the earth. Katrina, the little girl who was shot in the face, the first person that Santa Claus greeted at the door, actually went on to be a gun control activist, and in 2018, she helped organize a school walkout.
In a school walkout, Katrina Yusuf-Polsky read the names of the 17 victims killed in Parkland, Florida 1 month ago.
Nicholas Warren.
Gun violence is personal for the LaSalle High School student. Nearly 10 years ago, she survived a Christmas Eve massacre when she was only 8.
Being able to really fight for something that is truly, truly close to my heart is very different.
It happened at her family's home in Covina, when her aunt's ex-husband, dressed as Santa Claus and armed with 4 semi-automatic weapons, began shooting before setting the home on fire, killing 9 of her family members.
Leticia and her family suffered the most tragic and unfortunate loss, but moved forward with the most positive attitude, and I respect them so much for being able to keep their head held high in a situation such as theirs. Now, that's all I have on this case. If you guys have suggestions for cases you'd like me to cover, please comment them down below. And if you missed it, we covered the Black Dahlia as our first case and the Kristen Smart case as our second one. Please like and subscribe. Thanks, guys. Bye.